to the Built on Air podcast, the variety show for all things Airtable. Each episode, we cover 4 different segments. It's always fresh and different and lots of fun while you get the insider info on all things Airtable. Our hosts and guests are some of the most senior experts in the Airtable community. Join us live each week on our YouTube channel every Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern and join our active community at BuiltOnAir.com/join. Before we begin, a word from our sponsor, OnToAir.com. Any business running on Airtable gets the value that Airtable has, but also needs a few more functions to complete their operations. That's where OnToAir comes in. It's a suite of tools for any business running on Airtable to maximize your operations efficiencies and automations. One customer, John, states that OnToAir enables his business to function properly without having to think about building their own software, and that is pretty invaluable. The OnToAir Airtable apps are amazing, and we use them often and are very happy with the results. So join John and hundreds more customers and take your Airtable to the next level with OnToAir. Sign up today with promo code BuiltOnAir for a 10% discount. Check them out at OnToAir.com. And now let's check out today's episode and see what we built on air. All right, welcome back to the Built on Air podcast. We are at season 13, episode 5. Good to be with you. Myself, Dan Fellers, Camille, and Alli are back with us. Welcome back.
Hello.
Doing good?
Sure.
If I sound funny on this one, I think I bit my tongue over the weekend, so I have like a fat tongue, and I've been talking. It's a little bit better today. Yesterday I was talking pretty funny with the fat tongue, so if I sound different, that's why. But good to be with you all for a regular weekly live show with the Built on Air podcast. It's an hour show where we talk about different things going on in the Airtable world. I'll go through what we'll be discussing today. We always start with our round the bases and share what is going on in the different communities. Then I'll do a spotlight on our primary sponsor, OnToAir. Then have Camille showing her meal planning and scripts that she uses for her meal planning base. Then followed by Alli and generating data buckets for reporting using automations. And then a quick shout out to our community. And then finally, I'll talk about field focus, synced fields, and sync tables when dealing with record deletion. So with that, we've got a few things to highlight in or around the bases. I'll start off with our latest new community that we'll start covering, the new table forums launched by Scott, and Built on Air is also helping to sponsor that and get that going. So it's definitely picking up. You see starting to see a lot of traction there. So that is cool to see. But a couple things from there. Vivid Squid, who I know who it is. I don't know if he wants his identity out there, so I won't say his name, but talks about asking the question of the definitive guide on the secondary fields. And this was actually new to me. I never really spent time thinking about this. Quick shout out to Scott, who's watching, creator of Table Forums. But anyway, so the question is, maybe I'll show that in our Built on Air base. So if you have a linked record, if you do it with our hosts. So this information here of what fields show up in a linked record field. And I guess I've never really thought about that. So, but we do get a definitive answer. Did you guys know how that works?
Yes, and it's stupid.
Yeah. You should be able to control it like you can in interfaces, but it's based on the topmost grid view in a table.
Yep. So the topmost grid view. So if you go to that table, and what Scott pointed out was even if it's hidden, it will still show up there.
Mm-hmm.
So even and so
Uh-oh.
oh shoot.
No.
Dan.
It's back. Am I back?
Yes.
All right. I'm even plugged in directly to my internet, so something else is going on here.
Oh.
We'll see. Hopefully I stick around. But yeah, so the top four where they come from. So even if they're hidden, so it's basically these four here. So if you have one, drag it down so that it, shoot. Am I still here?
Yes.
All right. So yeah, so those are the fields that you need to be looking at to display on there. So that's good discussion. Shoot.
Definitely.
All right. I keep going in and out.
Well, to add on to that a little bit, there's that topmost grid view is also important in the layout of an expanded record. When you're looking at an expanded record that's on another table, it will also follow that same order of those grid view fields.
Yep.
The only exception to that is if you're looking at an expanded record on the table that you're currently on, then it'll follow the view that you're on.
Right. That's fair. All right. Moving on. Next one, also from Table Forums. This is a good summary. This actually, I didn't know about this one either. So Scott showcases a cool little trick. I'll show this video. So basically, if you have grouping in a view, and hold on real quick. We got a question from Alicia. Welcome, Alicia. Does it also control order field appear in Zap? So in Zapier.
I don't know. If I were to guess, I would say Airtable remembers the order in which fields were created for a table. My guess is that Zapier and other external integrations follows the created time for each field. So I don't believe it pays attention to the first grid view in the sidebar for that particular table, because there's no way for the other services to actually know which order views are grouped. That's not data that's passed.
Yeah, and that's what Scott mentions. It's based on field creation. Yeah, the default, although they did just add the ability, might be only at the enterprise. No, I think it's at the pro. Now the API allows you to know what fields are in a view. It used to not tell you that. It would tell you the views and the view names, but not what fields are actually visible. And now there's a parameter that you can pass when making an API call. So in the future, that might change now that information is available. But before that, yeah, it was the order of field creation.
I would love that in the scripting API.
Oh my God, I was doing something yesterday where I was like, why can't I do this? And I know what view I'm looking at, and Airtable knows what fields are in each view. Why can't I see it? So hopefully I have that.
Yeah, maybe that's coming. I think it is in the custom block.
It is.
Yeah.
So that's what I was used to. And then I went and tried to do something similar in scripting. And I was like, well, this is impossible. Great.
I really want to be able to, I'm anxious for the day where you can create a view programmatically with certain fields visible.
Mm-hmm.
That would be amazing. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Next one. So this is, I mentioned earlier. So if you have groupings, what you can do is you can actually, once you start selecting and holding down the control key or Apple key, it will actually update the grouping summary at the top based off of just the fields that you have selected. So I'll show this animation of Scott doing this. So once you have multiple selected, then the grouping value updates for just those selected. Which is kind of interesting. That could be bad, could be good, depending on what you need. But that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I like that.
It does that at the bottom if you have no group selected. So the very bottom bar, that's the overall summary of that column. I was not aware it also did that for individual groupings, but that makes sense if you do it for the summary bar at the bottom.
Love it.
Yep. All right, next one. This one's just kind of more humorous. Kelly on Twitter must have been looking at the documentation from Airtable and thought it was funny that they have to explain what an email is. So there's a section, what is email? Email is a method of exchanging messages between people using electronic devices. So very thorough documentation, at least on this page.
Love it.
I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of...
Okay. I need to go back on Twitter, apparently.
Right. I imagine they probably have like that format they have to follow for all their help docs. Like if they're integrating two things, they probably have to say, what is this? This is that.
That's probably fair. We'll give them the benefit of the doubt. It's also good for SEO purposes as well, I'm sure.
Sure.
Yeah, but anyways, that was... Okay, next one, we're moving on to the BuiltOnAir community. This actually came in today from Ben. He noticed, he's like, I didn't know you could share a read-only of the entire base. And other people mentioned, no, this has been around for a while. But I thought it was interesting if Ben hadn't noticed this, and Ben's a pretty power user of Airtable, then likely other people may not know about it. So I just thought I'd share it. So yeah, so if you click on share view, this is just for a view, but if you go up here and click up on here, you have the base or the view. So at the base level, you can share publicly. And it does give you a little bit more things, allow viewers to copy data out of the view. Now this one, I don't think everybody has. I don't think this one exists anymore, showing extensions added to the space. This was like a beta that they were doing that I signed up for, and they haven't taken it away, but they have said publicly that they're not planning to roll that out. So I guess I'm still cool for having that feature.
I think they have that feature. There's a beta for sharing extensions, embedding individual extensions. That's the one that they decided not to move forward with, even though I would love if they did, but they're probably just moving to focus more on interfaces.
So you can get extensions so that's available to everyone.
So they'll be, just a note, they'll be visible to anyone who has access to the link, but they won't be able to, if a feature of an extension is to edit or add or modify in any way any of the records underneath, the extensions will be disabled. They won't be able to do that feature. But if you have like a chart, for instance, it'll display the chart.
Right. Which is nice.
So I'm not cool, is what you're saying.
Well, I mean, you're cool, but just not for this particular feature.
Not this kind of cool. Okay. Well, that's cool. That's good that I was thinking that was still big. So that is part of it. Learning things new on the show. Here's a cool little trick from Angie. Interfaces in a grid view. You must be clicked in the grid, but then if you command F, it will bring up a find dialog that searches the interface pages just like within a view inside the base. If you right click at the name of a group in a grid view with a group, it will bring up a collapse menu that allows you to collapse one group, subgroup, or all with a click. Okay, so these are like 3 different tricks that she's sharing. Shift and space one, large a field, like a nose field, so you don't have to make the field wide or the rows taller. Yeah, I don't think I knew that last one. So if
it's a little frustrating for grid views in interfaces where you don't have it enabled for them to expand the whole record, because if text gets cut off, you just won't be able to see the rest of whatever's in that field. Like if you had a really long URL field, for instance, it's not expecting it to be multiple lines. It'll just do the ... thing, and you'll never know what the end of that URL is unless you click it.
Just space, yeah. So there's a quick shortcut. And I think they have lots of shortcuts you can go in the help. So that's good stuff. There's also other people, Tim, about an omnibox for searching. So you kind of combine fields into one, I'm guessing. So then you can just search that field. So that's a nice little trick. And there, he posted in the forums.
Love it.
So cool little hacks in there. One more, looks like this is new. So this is in interfaces. It looks, there's a new, I think it's a setting, not an actual new element. Oh, and I don't think this is live. They saw it on a seminar, so maybe this is coming. So here's a sneak peek.
In the early promo material for, I think, the first major update for interfaces, not the original announcement, but like the next time they did a batch release of a lot of features for interfaces, there was an element that looked like this, and I said it reminded me of either Notion or Coda, because they had similar kind of styles for how they show like a table component. And I was waiting for several months now, it's been, for that to appear. And I don't know if it's just a marketing thing where they just build, how commercials, there's not actually cereal you're looking at, like that's like motor oil or whatever that they use to make it look good for camera. I'm wondering if they did something similar where, are we ever going to get this thing? Because I saw this like months ago and it's still not there.
Yeah. I want it. I think it looks so much better.
It looks nice and clean.
Yeah.
I think it would be a welcome addition.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's so many things.
Some this.
Yeah. Yeah. Looking forward to that day.
All right. Yep. Okay. Let's get it. The last three. The last three things I'll show are actually new product releases related to Airtable. So there's quite a few people putting out new stuff. So I always like tinkering with the new toys. So here's a couple that you can try out. So this one's a map charting. So if you do anything with maps, they're building an extension to visualize your data in maps. So it's in the marketplace. You can check that out. It's called Map Chart. So saw that on Reddit. Every time I switch tabs, which is crazy, I lose connection. Okay, so there's also a WordPress syncing plugin. So if you're doing anything with WordPress and Airtable, this helps sync your data. So I believe it's a plugin on the WordPress side that talks to your Airtable base and pulls data from Airtable into WordPress, and maybe vice versa. So any WordPress stuff, check out Airwp Sync. And Then another one, this one was actually in the Airtable community. I think I saw it on Reddit as well, but base inspector. So this is kind of cool. And I believe this individual used to work at Airtable and left, but is now building this tool. So it's a Chrome extension that if you use Make or Zapier, when you're in Zapier or Make, it will actually tell you what bases it's using if you're connected to the Airtable connector. And so it will actually kind of inspect that and show you the base information. So if you're a heavy user of one of those two products and you want to get better insights into how it's using Airtable, that's a Chrome extension you can check out.
It's very useful because when you have a lot of external automations, sometimes you forget that there are other automatic processes that are connected to your Airtable base. It's easy if it's an Airtable automation because there's a whole tab for it and you can look at it. But if there's no visual indicator in your base that a particular record, series of records, or table is referenced by an external automation, it gets really easy to forget that they exist.
Yep. All right. I think, Alli, you want to share your tidbit that you found this week?
Oh, yeah. I had a couple different things. In interfaces, there's now the option to orient your charts horizontally, which is super, super cool. Just another cool little visual tweak. And then another weird one that I saw was I was in a base that was over limits. And in the bottom left-hand corner where there typically would be that plus sign to add a new record, it actually had a little like red triangle with an exclamation point. And when I moused over it, it was like, this base is over limits. To continue adding records, you have to upgrade. And it did let me still add records, but that tells me that they are making movement on actually locking down bases if they become over limits, which we haven't seen until now. So
yeah,
just a word of caution.
Yeah, they're definitely locking down on that. Cool. Yeah, that's good on the charting as well. So, well, that concludes what's going on, keeping you up to date in the world of Airtable. Let's move on to OntoAir, our primary sponsor. It's an all-in-one toolkit to run your business on Airtable, a suite of apps that help you do more with your Airtable business or what you're doing in Airtable. We've been talking a lot about new features coming out with in our forms. One thing that I was going to show today was sometimes there's things that we need to do that are a little bit more behind the scenes, and they're not as cool as the cool new features, but they are kind of critical to making sure that things are running behind the scenes more. And so today I was going to showcase we're about to release our OAuth integration. So I've been spending quite a bit of time working with the new OAuth from Airtable, and that will be coming soon into OntoAir, so you won't have to use your legacy API keys. They will still be supported, so we'll still have them at least for a while they're still valid, but these are going away next year in February. But you can also, instead of an API key, you can use what they call their personal access tokens. Those work the same as an API key. So those will still work here, although they don't want us to kind of rely on those. And so we are pushing the OAuth, but we will support, it will work just like an API key does, or an OAuth. So either way will work, although we are kind of encouraged to go the OAuth route and do that. And so once you click on this, it'll take you to an Airtable page that showcases the permissions. The one thing I kind of don't like is you are required to have to select what workspace or what bases that you want to give access to. We kind of encourage people to give access to all of them, so that anything that you want to do in OntoAir, this connector will already have access to all your bases, plus future bases, which is important. But if you want to lock it down, you can lock it down within a certain workspace or base. So that should be coming if all our testing goes well as early as this weekend, maybe another week after that. But excited to get that out there, start using. All right, now Camille is going to tell us what she eats each day.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes. Well, so this base I created quite some time ago. I see that it was last updated July 28th, 2020, which was not the day that I released it originally, but this base I made for meal planning, I think was the base that I demoed when I was interviewed for BuiltOnAir. I could be wrong, but I think I used this base as my sort of example of all the cool, neat stuff you could do in Airtable. And over the years, of all the things that I've made for Airtable, this is the one that gets the most support questions. And I got one over the weekend. And the reason why is because although the base comes in fine on the universe, the scripts apparently don't come in, which is really unfortunate. I think if I re-release it, they might come in. But the reason I haven't done that is because I haven't looked at these scripts in 2 years. And it's possible that they might need some updating. So for this segment, I wanted to just give a rundown of what is supposed to happen when you click these disabled buttons, and then talking through some improvements that I'm considering making based on their current functionality. As a disclaimer, I have a separate copy of this same base that I sometimes use in my personal life, and I don't use the scripts at all. I just do it all manually. So you don't need these scripts, but they're useful. So the big idea, generally speaking, for this base structure, which is pretty adaptable, not just for meal planning, but more complex relationships in between different tables. You have a table full of meals, and each meal has a particular day and a type, but it can be linked to one or more different recipes. So if I wanted to cook 2 things on one day, I could. And then I have a button that will create leftovers. So an idea I had for this base was I say I want to make 5 servings. I'm not going to eat 5 servings in one day. I would be able to click a button and it would duplicate this same meal, the tomato sauce plus the stuffed shells, 4 times for consecutive days after this. And then I would say, well, this is what I'm going to be eating over the next 4 days, because the yield is 5. I'm eating the day that I'm cooking. That is one of the scripts that is in the base. Another one is prepare recipe, which I don't understand why this was a script to begin with. So this is why I didn't ever re-release it, because in actually using it in my day-to-day, I sort of decided it's not super necessary. Looking at how the recipes table is structured, it has all of the fields that you might expect to be in a recipe field. And of course, like many different table structures, it relies on a junction table that I've named recipe ingredients. If I go to recipe ingredients, you'll see that each recipe has more than one line item that says how much of each ingredient needs to be placed within the recipe. So if I go to the ingredients page, it's pretty simple. The only thing that's somewhat special about this table was that it would be able to calculate what I would need to go to the store for based on what I have planned as a meal for that particular week. What the prepare recipe script is supposed to do is subtract what I have cooked from what I have said is in my pantry. That is incredibly unreliable, and I don't recommend this particular methodology that is loosely implied by this script here, unless you have a very, if you're a business, for instance, and you have very structured processes for maintaining inventory, then this is the type of script that would be necessary. If you're just some person like me who lives in a house who may or may not keep an accurate account of how many ounces of tomato sauce you have, you don't need this script. So this is a cautionary tale about whether or not you need to go overboard with something. The one that I think is worth saving is create leftovers. So I'm going to press the button and hope that it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll troubleshoot why.
Love it.
So, okay, so it did what I expected it to do. You'll see, I have duplicates that were made, counting each days. I think it did 5. Yeah, it made 5 when it should have made 4, troubleshooting. But you'll see that it copied the same meal over, and it also marked it as a leftover with this field. Reason I did that is because the ingredients table is rolling up all of the things that I should be shopping for whatever is this week in my meals table, except I don't need to shop for the ingredients of leftovers. They've already been cooked. So this is basically saying don't add any meal that is duplicated. Looking at the code, what's happening here? You'll notice I'm using math, which is a bad sign. We're looking at the meals table. We're looking at the recipes table. Because I'm using a button field to activate the script, I don't need to go in here and click and select a particular meal. I could, but I am relying on, for usability's sake, creating or clicking on a button. From there, we're saying what is the date that meal was created on. So I don't necessarily need today's date, because if I'm planning ahead for, tomorrow, Wednesday, I want to start calculating the leftovers from Thursday onward. So then I want to get all of the records that are linked to that particular recipe, or all of the recipes linked to that particular meal, sorry. I want to get how much that yield I said would be. So I said 5 for this particular record I clicked on. And then if I don't have a yield put in there, I want to default to 2. So, I'm probably not going to make 1 serving at a time. I'm probably going to make at least 2 servings if I haven't put in a number that's customized for that field. And then for each number of yield, I want to create a record in the table for meals that basically copies the same values for the recipes over, and then increments the date by 1. Because I am a singular person and I'm not going to be making 50 meals or 51 meals at once, I elected to just create each record one by one instead of batch creating the records in one go. I think if I were to redo this script, I would batch create the records instead of doing one by one. So in order to do that, this script would need to be altered a little bit in order to accommodate that. Part of the reason why I create records one by one is because I was trying to increment each date by 1. And if you're batch creating records, you sort of have to prepare the record values in advance and then batch create them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So looking at this, I would redo it. if I were to re-release it. And I just wanted to explain why, because every now and again, someone will come across that meal planner base, which works as it is. And again, you do not need the scripts in order for it to function. What there should be is a tool that makes it easier to sort of fill out this table, which is, it's not hard to fill out, but it's tedious. And it's tedious for, junction records in general. But that's it. That's just an overall view of how this table is structured. And hopefully by next week, I will have a updated version of this. And if the scripts still aren't coming in through the universe, then I'll link to my GitHub page where you could just copy the same text over.
So that's even if you download the base, the scripts weren't coming in?
I don't know.
Really?
Well, let's see. Copy base.
And Scott asks if you have a base that will actually cook the meals for him.
No. So I really don't. Silly.
Nope.
Absolutely silly that it doesn't do that.
There's a setting
Right.
before you share the base in the actual script extension to toggle on. That could be it, but
it could be.
I think it's when you upload it into the universe, isn't it?
Well, right in the scripting app, there's also one under advanced, I think.
Oh.
Yeah, show code and stuff.
There it is.
That's what I did wrong.
I don't think that option was available when you posted
I don't think
this.
it was either, because again, this was last updated in 2020.
Yeah.
So it had been some time. I'm not going to republish this though until the scripts have been updated, because again,
I did also notice if you go back to the code in your leftover, I think you're missing an await on line 19.
Oh yeah, I am.
Oh yeah.
See, I was young and naive then.
Yeah. Must await. Awesome. Cool. Thank you for sharing that, Camille. It's always fun to go back and look at code from 2 years ago.
It's never fun because I always find things where I'm like, why did I do this? This is pointless.
Yeah. But the key is, if you want to know the secret to not having any leftovers, is having a teenage boy in your house. I've learned that.
Gotta have to give me a few years.
So that's in our house. My son does not leave much for leftovers. All right. Moving on. Alli.
All right.
Hold on here. Let me share your screen.
All right. Okay, so I was saying before we started this broadcast today, I can't remember if I've demoed this once before, but I think it's worth demoing again if I have. I saw someone asking a question related to this in the Airtable community group on Facebook the other day. And it's a super useful tool that I use a lot in bases where I have to do like complex time-based reporting. It's also just nice if you like data and you want to bucket it in different ways. This is a good little method to employ. So I have this transactions table. That's all I have in this base. I've got a date, an amount. This gross transaction is just looking at whether it's an expense or income. So it multiplies the amount by -1 if it's an expense. Otherwise, just by 1 to keep it the same. And then I just have a single select field for company. This could be a linked record field, of course, but just to keep things very simple. I'm going to just talk about what I would do if I wanted to create a table of months. You could also do this with a table of weeks, or even go super granular down to like the day level if you wanted. But we'll focus on months for today. So I'm just going to create a new table. and I'm going to call it months. And what I typically do on this table is I add a date field, and I'll call it month start, and just put in, I know that my data starts in 2020, so I'm going to do just a couple months to start and give myself a lot of records in this table. I like to go out like as far as possible just so I don't ever have to worry about it. You could also set up an automation to create records on this table as you go through time, so you never have to worry about keeping this table populated. Another little trick, if you start, just like in Excel, if you start the pattern of 2 fields here and grab this little square nub on the side and drag it down, it'll follow that pattern down for that column. And then I'm going to add a formula for my name field. I always start with an if statement if I'm trying to transform a date, because if you don't have one, it'll give you an error. And I hate seeing those little hashtag errors throughout the base. So I'm going to say if I have my month start field filled in, then I want to format that start. And I have a very particular way of formatting that I've landed on after a while that I think is nice. And I have a reason for it, which is if you start with this YY-MM, then when you're grouping, everything's going to fall in line first by year, then by month. And so then it'll allow you to also show out the month and year in full after that. So it still looks nice and you can easily quickly see what each month is named. So then on my transactions table, I want to do the same thing. I'm going to create a formula field to transform this date, the date of my transaction, into that same format for the month that it falls into. So I'm going to write if I have a date, I want to format that date the same way. So YY-MM, and then the full month and the full year. This // is just visual. You could do whatever you want there. It could even just be a space. Doesn't need to be there, but I like it for visual purposes. And I'm going to name this month with a little gear in front of it. This is just my little symbol. I use gears all the time to like remind myself and anybody else that might be in this space, hey, this field is important. It's integral to the workings of how something functions in this space, but you can ignore it. It can basically always stay hidden. Then I'm going to add a linked record field to my months table. And I'm just going to call it month. And finally, I'm going to add one more field, and I'm going to call it update link to month. And I'm going to write in this field, I'm going to say, if I have a month, if I know what month this record needs to be bucketed into, and that month does not equal the month that I have it linked to, then I know I want to update the links to the month. So all of these get filled in. If I were to take this and paste it here, this now goes away. So this gives me the ability to use that field as my automation trigger. So if I wanted to set up an automation, I would pick one. I usually, 99% of the time, I'm using when a record matches conditions as my trigger. And I'm going to say on the transactions table, when my update link to month field is not empty. Got this one example here. Then I want to update that same record. I'm going to update that month linked record field with the value from my formula field that knows what month it should be linked to. So if I test that out, we can see that gets rid of my formula field and it links it up to that month. Say link to month. I turn that on. Now, when I delete something, it should just pop right back in. And now on our months table, we'll be able to, if I just change this into a roll up, and I roll up that gross transaction field, I sum up all the values. Now I can easily see what I've got for each month. You can use roll-up fields to get, your average transaction or your highest transaction, lowest, etc. All sorts of different things you could do with it from that point. I like to also create like a years table and link that up to months, so that way you can create reporting interfaces for each year, for each month. You could go down to weeks or days, but the same method works really well to keep all the data where it needs to be in order to get that reporting correct. That's
very cool.
Excellent.
Nice trick there. Jan says he also does it similarly for his sales input.
Yeah, I have a base on the universe that also uses a similar sort of methodology, and it includes a formula field that outputs, if you want to do, as you're saying, years and months, it'll output, both of them in just one field. So you don't have to have a one field for each, and then uses a similar process for automations. It'll just link them both into the correct link fields.
Mm-hmm. It works really well. The only downside to it that I've found is sometimes I'll also write into my formula that actually triggers the automation, like make sure that I have a couple other pieces of that record before it runs. Because if you're actually entering the data in and you start typing a date, it's going to evaluate that date immediately and think that it has the right month. And it could be, maybe you're trying to fill in something from 2 years ago and it's going to automatically think it's February 2023. Mm-hmm. So there are some catches, but in general, it works very well.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Alli, for sharing that. All right. Quick shout out to join our community at BuiltOnAir.com/join. That gets you in. We have a goal to get to 2,000 members in our Slack community, and we're making good progress. We're about a third of the way there for this year. So that we'd love to get as many people in and participate. And also, we'd love to have you come on the show. So if you want to share your story and your journey in the Airtable world, we'd love to have you on. Just reach out and we'll get you on a future episode. Our final segment, I'm going to showcase sync fields or sync tables and how to deal with record deletion. So I assume if you have been using synced tables, it's been out for a while. And basically what it allows you to do is to have one table in one base get synced over into another table. And down the road, they'll have two-way sync. That's not available to everyone yet, but that is coming. But for now, it's kind of a one-way sync from one base. So you have your source base, and then you can sync it over into a destination. But when you set that up, so right now I'm in my destination. So you basically, from your destination, you'll create a new table, and there will be a process to pull them base. And one of the options of your synced table is how to deal with deleted records from the source. And so by default, it will delete the record in this table so that it always stays in sync. But it does have an option where you can leave the record in this table even when it gets deleted from the source table. So that's kind of useful if you want to. You can almost use this as like an archive where this keeps anything that gets deleted, and maybe you're refreshing your source with the latest information, but you want to delete everything, but you want to keep it in another base. So that's one trick you could use this feature for. So I've used this in some consulting work, And I think a couple seasons ago, I showcased how you can determine if you have that setting turned on, to leave it here. If you have that turned on, how can you determine if a record that's here was deleted in the source? And the way that it used to work, there's kind of two ways. And the way that I preferred, Airtable actually changed at some point along the way, and it no longer works, and it actually messed up our processes. But it used to be what we would do is we would create a formula field that exposed the source record ID. So this is a unique identifier for that record. So we would have this record ID, and this record ID would actually get removed if that field was deleted from the source. And so, so I'll create a new record here that will now get a unique identifier for the source. And then if I go over to the destination, get it synced over, it used to be if I deleted, there it is. If I deleted it from the source here, this record ID would actually be blank. And so it was easy to then create a formula field that says, if the record ID that's coming from the source, not the destination's record ID, because this destination record will have its own record ID that'll be different than the record ID in the source. But if the source record ID is blank, that means that record was deleted. But they changed that behavior, and now this record ID does not get deleted. So it actually holds on to what the deleted record's ID was. And I'll showcase that. And so this formula no longer works because this is not blank, or it still has a value, so it's not blank. So if I delete it from here, come over here and sync. You'll see it's actually still there. Wait, it's syncing. Okay, you'll see that this is still there. So this formula that is what the approach that we used to take no longer works. So the workaround is to use a source link button. And so what that is a button where this action is only available if this is a sync table. It allows you to link to the URL in the source table, which is nice so that you can jump back and forth between the destination and the source. So if I click on this, it will open up in a new tab the source record. If it's deleted, there's no longer a source, and so this is disabled. And so then I have a new formula that is looking and say it's source link. So if that button is blank, even though it doesn't necessarily look blank, it actually is blank, then I know that this record was deleted in the source. So this is the new approach that you can do to determine if a record got deleted from the source. So if you were using the old way, which we were, someone along the way probably said, I need to know that record ID. It would come in handy if you just wanted to have a unique identifier for a deleted record. Maybe you were archiving it, exporting it somewhere, and you want to be able to still reference it. I think there's still value in having that record ID, but it did break this detection here.
Great workaround,
luckily,
Dan.
there's a workaround.
We have news from the front. If you recall 20 minutes ago when we were like, gee, I wish that mysterious new element type was available in interfaces, gets released eventually. It's released now. So First brought to my attention by Ben Bailey on the BuiltOnAir Slack community, and then by Jan in our live chat here. So if desired, I have made an interface with it on there, and I'm sharing my screen. This is what it looks like. It looks exactly how I thought it would based on the thing. So it's real.
I love it.
Good work, team, because bold still comes in. That's nice.
Nice.
So
somebody was watching the show and said, "Oh, I can turn that on."
You know what? I like to think that's what happened. I don't know if it did. So it's it's one of the things that can be easily convertible. So very useful feature. If you made a grid and think it's better as a gallery, you can just swap back and forth, but now you can swap it to a list component. You pick a source for the table. Apparently you can do hierarchy. I don't know what that means. I think it might be their version of grouping. I've looked at this for roughly 60 seconds, so I don't have the scoop quite yet on exactly what it is. There's a prefix field. What does that mean? Who knows? I have no compatible field, apparently.
Interesting.
If I turn a field off, nope. What does that mean? Selections with no additional rows? What does that mean? What's happening?
Yeah.
What happens if I select? What's going on?
Oh my God, you can add records too?
Yes, which is great.
Inline.
I've got lots of things to go play with now.
Yeah, so I'll be distracted for quite some time. I don't want to open up from here, but that works how you would expect it to. It's really persistent on me opening it in a new thing. You could change row height, which is nice, and then labeling, which is to be expected. What happens if I have things selected? Is it?
If you go to preview it, does it give you more options?
What happens? What does it mean? Can I right click? Oh, I can delete them.
Delete all.
Interesting. Okay. Cool.
All right.
Fun things.
So a nice new interface layout. I need to figure out what levels do. I see the premium icon on here. So this base is on a pro level workspace. I wonder. So it's letting me do it. So I think it's available for at least pro level and enterprise. I don't know if you do it on the plus level. That remains to be seen. Oh my God. Does this do what I think it's doing? You could do your record and then records that are linked to that record. Sub-records. That's what this is.
Wow.
That's incredible.
All right.
I'm very happy. We'll cover this obviously in more detail next episode. But Jesus Christ, that's a big one.
Yeah.
Enable.
So what's happening, based on my understanding, for this particular base I'm looking at, there are different types of buildings, like a house and apartment, and then precedence, which is an example of, 123 Fake Street is an example of a house, and 456 Other Street is another example of a house. That's controlled by a link field. So what I should be seeing when I'm done, I'm going to ignore this. Right now it's letting me pick which fields I want visible. You can see, here are all of the precedent examples that are of the type multiplex small. So I can add a record from here that is linked already. Will it work? I don't know. Because right now you can't, in other view types, if I go back and look, this is a list versus a grid. Previously in a grid view, you couldn't add new records if the source was a linked record field. You had to find some other way to add records in here. So this might be a good workaround for that. But yay, nested records.
That is cool.
This is a formula field, so me not being able to edit that is expected.
Wow.
And then you can control the width.
Nice. Cool. I wonder if anything else came out new this morning.
I don't know. But you can see here that you can control individually whether or not you can open up each level of, each level that you have in this nested list. I don't know how many levels you can add as a maximum. First glance, this seems a little backwards to me. Precedents are my nested level. To me, this is level 2 and this is level 1. That seems backwards to me.
Yeah. Interesting.
Levels. And then I can add a new level above. So that is an intentional thing for them.
Interesting.
I don't know. I think I would have done it the other way around, but this seems very cool. So I'll be obsessed with this for the next 2 hours.
Melanie asks, how many levels does it do?
Who knows? I don't know. This space isn't complicated enough for me to really push its boundaries. I'd have to find or create some random use case to really see if I were to guess either 5 or 10, because this would get really convoluted if you have several layers, or at least that's my opinion. I still don't know what prefix field means or does. And that's what I think, what this is controlling is like in a grid view, if you are grouping by a select field and you have a certain select option that isn't represented in any of your records, you can hide that group. This is a similar functionality. There are no linked records for several of those building types, so they are hidden from view based on my selection here. If I show them, they come back and you'll see that there's nothing underneath primary dwelling.
So Scott says it's actually a new view type in the data side.
It's there too?
Go out to the data.
I'm losing my mind.
Go to view.
Oh my gosh.
List.
Oh my God.
Wow.
It's dark blue and everything. What on earth? Oh my.
So that means they haven't fully given up on adding stuff to this side of things. That is cool. All
right. So obviously we're going to talk about this next week when I actually know what I'm looking at. But this seems like a very, it is what appears to be a medium between the Gantt view and the grid view, because the Gantt view shows, a nested sort of relationship underneath different records as well. Except this is pulling in data from another view. This is going to make, I think, a lot of people's lives a whole lot easier. And then roughly 2 weeks from now, we're going to come up with a list of things that we want to be different. But in those blissful first 2 weeks, honeymoon period, we're going to be so happy.
Yeah. It does also kill some of the extensions.
Exactly. That always happens where I'll have an extension in mind and then Airtable will improve something just enough where it makes it obsolete for me.
I've been there as well.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, we'll do a segment on this next week for sure. Very cool. I love breaking news on the show.
Love it.
You've seen it here first on Built on Air podcast.
Or actually, you've seen it first on the Built on Air Slack community, courtesy of Ben Bailey.
That's right. Thank you, Ben. showing that. Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining with us, and we will see you next week on the Built on Air podcast. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining today's episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check out our sponsor, ontoair.com, and we will see you next time on the Built on Air podcast.